Good afternoon and welcome to this investor webinar for Rubber Monkey. Thank you for giving up your time this afternoon. My name is David Curtis. I'm a growth director here at Snowball Effect, New Zealand's leading private equity online marketplace. Snowball Effect was engaged by Rubber Monkey to assist with the preparation for this capital raise and to facilitate it. For those of you that are not familiar with Snowball Effect, our platform provides a simple way to discover and to invest in privately held New Zealand growth companies. Over the years, we've now raised over $140 million for a variety of private Kiwi growth companies. Today, I've got the great pleasure to introduce Laurie Alexander, the CEO and co-founder of Rubber Monkey. Just before I hand over to him though, just some quick housekeeping. I'm not going to tell you where the exits are, but just to let you know, look, the purpose of this webinar is for Laurie to summarise the Rubber Monkey business and its strategy, but predominantly to let you be able to ask some questions that you might have about the business. The format is going to be 10 to 15 minute presentation. I say that, Laurie's going to do his very best. It may go a little bit longer, but he will do his best on that, and then followed by the Q&A. You can submit questions below by just clicking on that Ask a Question tab. Also, if you see a question there that you really like, please vote for it because we will ask the questions in the order of popularity. I also have some questions at the start as well, so you please just add to those. The webinar will be about 60 minutes long. We are recording it, so you can go back and listen to any part of it again, and or if you need to jump off at some stage, you can go back and pick up from where you left off. So I won't delay this any further. I'm just going to hand straight over to Laurie.
Thanks, David. Cool to have everyone here. Like, I know everyone's time is really quite precious at the moment because we're all pretty busy, but it's great to have good number of people come along and have the opportunity to talk about Rubber Monkey on this platform. So I've got a group of slides here that I'm going to work my way through and speak to each one of them. I've been trying to incorporate some of the top questions into my presentation, the answers into the presentation. But of course, if I skip something, feel free to get a question there. I'll try to pack it all into this next 15 minutes. So to start with, I think we should jump to this first slide. So a little bit about each of the founders and the board. So myself, I have a retail background. My first job ever was in retail, music retail. And I've continued that for several years. So both in New Zealand, I worked in music retail, and then I shifted to Sydney, Australia in the late 90s and worked in music retail over there. And after a few years of that, I then moved into wholesale and distribution. So sort of sales is my background. I'm quite familiar with that world. I also did a stint as a professional musician in Australia. So that my total tenure over there was about nine years of living in Sydney before returning to New Zealand in 2007, where we set up Rubber Monkey. So Nigel Stanford, we've been long-time friends. I've known Nigel since we were 21, so that goes back into the late 90s. Both musicians, and we worked on music together. We had a studio together, so it was always bound to be that we'd start a company together. And around 2007, when I returned from Australia, we did start that company, and that was Rubber Monkey. The first version of Rubber Monkey was actually a rental company selling, renting camera equipment, renting ancillary equipment to production companies in New Zealand to make films, that sort of thing. Nigel was a budding filmmaker, and I was keen to get involved. And we did that for 3 years. And that was the period where the idea of Rubber Monkey, the current Rubber Monkey, came from, because we were having such trouble sourcing gear. It was insane. It was try to call someone and wait for a call back and not get a quote on a camera or some piece of equipment. When you did get a quote, the pricing was crazy, and it would have been so much easier to source it offshore. This kept going on and on and on. So while we were fitting out our business, the whole time I'm pestering Nigel, going, "Man, we've got to do something about this. Like, as a sales guy, this is making me crazy. I want to fix this." Around about 2009, so a little bit of history about Nigel. Nigel Stanford is ex-CEO of TradeMe in the early days. So early 2000s, he ran TradeMe, and I think he was employee number 4. He was tasked with a lot of the user operation stuff. He was a coder at TradeMe before he moved into the CEO role. So that history for him was like an opportunity to see the big wide world of e-commerce and understand how things work in a way that not many people get to do. So after leaving TradeMe, he then started a company called StarNow, which is an online talent company, with a couple of friends also from TradeMe. That was very successful. And then subsequently, he was also an early investor in Mighty Ape. So those are 3 key things. But I think the takeaway from that is Nigel's been involved in e-commerce for a long time at the very upper echelon. And then it also leads into Phil Cox, our CTO. So Phil is one of the senior developers that was at TradeMe. He's been involved in some of those businesses like StarNow. Him and his wife have a business called Beauty Bliss. So Phil's an expert at the technology of e-commerce. So got a pretty strong team of people there with a pretty amazing pedigree. So when it came to setting up Rubber Monkey in 2010, I think all the pieces were there. We just basically had to make the commitment. So bugged Nigel until about early 2010, I think late 2009. He was like, "Yep, screw it, let's do this." And so we did. So we picked one brand. The first thing we did was I set about finding some kind of off-the-shelf platform. And within 24 hours, Nigel sat me down and said, "I'm going to teach you how this stuff really works. And we won't be using an off-the-shelf platform." And so Rubber Monkey, and we'll talk about this a lot more later on, is a proprietary platform. It's basically, we started from line of code number 1. Everything that we build is bespoke and designed to help our business. It's not designed to be generic and used by anyone. It's designed to be optimized for the Rubber Monkey platform. So once we built that, we just started adding product in there and figuring all the things out. It takes longer. You could buy an off-the-shelf application to do web e-commerce and be up and running within a day. And I think that's the pitch that some people get from some of those platforms. But the reality is, over the long term, you don't get to do all the awesome stuff that you need to make an e-commerce platform really sing. So to give you some idea, and I'll keep waxing on about this because this is just a huge part of what we do, is that other than what people see, the Rubber Monkey website where you add to cart and you check out and you do all that basic stuff, what's really going on is behind that is a massive admin world which controls everything that we do. So warehouse, purchasing, sales and marketing, returns and repairs, that all live in this little ecosystem in the back of the website, which makes everyone's life easier because it all integrates nicely. The different departments are talking to different departments, and whatever we want to do to make that better is something that we get to dictate because the platform is ours. So it's pretty important. I'm going to keep talking about that stuff. I'll jump to the next screen so we can sort of talk about some of the growth history. So when we started out, we had our one product line, which were Pelican cases. We thought that was a good place to start. It seems like a product we had a hell of a time getting our hands on, and we started bringing in some Pelican cases, and those did very well. It was really timely that in 2010, DSLR cameras started shooting video, which democratized that whole world and has led to more and more people being able to shoot this really cinematic looking content. So 2010 is coupled really nicely between the technology being there and us launching our platform. So we started adding all of those types of products that worked within that ecosystem. So DSLRs needed battery accessories and shoulder rigs and that sort of stuff. And we jumped on board and grabbed those types of products. We reached out to suppliers in the US, and sure enough, no one else was handling those. So we did. And then organically, as the years went by, we would just add more and more of products. But always with a view to like pacing ourselves. I think we could have grown faster, but we probably would have tripped up a lot more if we'd just thrown tons and tons of money. It's never been about pouring money into the stock. It's about like really good pace. And I think that's been a great thing because we haven't ended up in this huge debt hole where we just owe so much money. We got really too far ahead of ourselves. So all this culminated in 2015. We were a Deloitte Fast 50 award winner, and that felt really great. It's like things are working, things are doing really well. We still, chose to pace ourselves, and we still do, and control the speed of growth, because it's also about building the platform, which is where we are now. So 12 years later, we've got a really mature platform that allows us to do some really exciting stuff, and that's where the crowdfunding stuff comes in. So just speak to these things. We've got our point of difference. So proprietary technology, it's built in house, and I can't, he's a friend, but talking about Nigel, Nigel has an exceptional mind for these sorts of things. There's articles online where that talk about this better, but they were exposed to a world at Trade Me that very few people will get to, just because the amount of audience that they had taught them things that other people didn't know. And I spent a lot of time with Nigel talking about that sort of stuff, and him basically teaching me what not to do as much as what to do, which has led us to build a really solid platform that we avoided a whole bunch of pitfalls that I know everyone falls into when they start to do this kind of stuff. Lots of mistakes. There's an ocean of mistakes to be made, which we avoided a lot of due to Nigel's experience in doing that sort of stuff. The long-term thinking of the strategy is really, it's just like, how do we grow this so that in 5-10 years time, we're so far ahead of competitors? We've got so much lead time away from them that for them to catch up would be quite hard, because they've got to build the amount of stuff that we have, and it's just not that easy. One of the things about customer focus, that I think everyone would say that we'd be the best customer focused company out there, but to do that you also need tools. Like, you need a system that will allow you to offer your customers that service. So things like warranty, I know that's a real pitfall for a lot of businesses. They just don't know how to handle those returns, communicate effectively with people. We've built a system which is part of our technology that manages every step of that, and it's constantly being worked on. It's not perfect, but it's light years ahead of what a lot of other people are doing. So to actually provide, customer focus can be a buzzword, but to actually do it, the technology is required. You have to build things to actually achieve that. So here we are, July 2022, and we're looking to get into the Australian market. So it's a bit of a exciting step for us. Something we've been working on for a long time. Would have liked to do it earlier, but obviously there's things like COVID got in the way of that. So Australia's a market I know really well. It's really interesting to see just how much money is in that market. It's a 5 times population, but more like an 8 times spend. So there's a lot more content creation going over there, whether it's television or film, independent production. A lot of people, even the scale of people's hobby filmmaking is much larger. So it's a huge market. And then we'll talk about competition. So for us, it's funny coming from New Zealand. You get a smaller market, but everyone has to really try hard to get that dollar. In Australia, it's what on the ground there is a lot of incumbent businesses. They've been there a long time, and they've come from bricks and mortar background. They're not like us, where we are born and bred e-commerce. I think there are some new players over there that we think are pretty exciting, and give them credit for that, but not really in the space that Rubber Monkey's in. We tend to be competing with companies that are older, are conflicted between managing their bricks and mortar day to day and trying to add a web-centric offering. And the two don't quite meet in the middle. They're quite different requirements for each side of that business. So whilst they're dealing with that, we have a far more focused e-commerce offering, which I think gives us an edge in that market. So expectations are pretty high that we'll do well over there. Some of the highlights, the one that jumps out for me, these are kind of interesting if you're into numbers. is the 94,000 product listings. So that would sound huge to a lot of people, but it's really just scraping the surface. And one of the things that we have with our platform is the ability to automate a lot of that process, so we can get products listed really quickly, and that's been getting better as well. So even though that sounds like a lot of products, expect that to double in the next 2 to 3 years. There's an enormous range of products out there that it's not just stuff. It's like, I mean, one of the cable product ranges that we do is in the thousands of products just for that one type of thing, because there's a lot of specialty in what we do. So being able to just list everything and get it into market, broaden the net. I mean, we do keep a lot of stock, but what we're trying to do is build an ability to get a lot of just-in-time processes going. So if someone needs a specialist product, they're not waiting months for it. They can get with it within a few weeks. And that's one of our big focuses, to get better at doing that sort of thing. Strategy in Australia, everything's working. We have all our systems in place. We actually have our branch set up over there. So we have an office. It's in Artarmon in Sydney, which is actually the centre of a lot of the kind of commerce that we do. Production companies there. Some of our competitors are there. So it's a really great spot. It's just out of the city. All we need to do is get stock in on the ground. So the focus of this capital raise is really about stock. It's about buying inventory and getting it moving. We've been very limited in our offering into Australia so far because there are quite strict embargoes on what products can be sold from New Zealand to Australia, and vice versa. In market, there are specific distributors assigned those products. So we've had a very small offering into Australia of products so far, but by being on the ground in market, we have access to those products now. So we can turn on a lot of products that we've been limited the ability to sell from out of New Zealand pretty quickly. Marketing and sales, I love talking about this. Our marketing team's always looking to be really inventive in what we do. It's a reflection of the community goals of Rubber Monkey. It's a chance for me to talk about the name a little bit. Is that when we started the company, we went through lots of names. We were definitely pro this and technology that and photo this and all these rubbish names, but they're really Me Too names. It's like we didn't want to be Me Too. We don't really sound like everyone else. We were like, nah, we've got to make this radically different and really accessible. So people go, Rubber Monkey? That sounds kind of like they're not taking themselves too seriously. It's that kind of philosophy is what we were trying to create. So we were accessible as a company. So our marketing and sales, feed into that culture. We spend a lot of time talking to our customers about what they do and featuring them on our social media, doing that sort of thing. We do competitions that show off the work of the people that submit to those competitions, and we've got lots and lots of ideas in that space. So there's heaps more coming there. In terms of exit strategy, this will get asked a lot, I'm sure. So the plan is a 4 to 5 year term. Money in now, just hold your position, and in 4 to 5 years, we're hoping that there's a really good outcome for investors at this point. A lot more of this details in our IM, and I can definitely speak to this some more. But we're pretty excited about what this could be, and I obviously feel very strongly it's a great investment for people. I've committed a lot of my time to it, and I think this is just a journey we'd like to take a lot of our customers on with us. So, little snapshot of financials. New Zealand, we expect to grow at sort of an organic rate. A lot of this is bolstered by just more product. The more things we have to sell, the more things we sell. That's generally true of web stores. And certainly someone that's as broad as Rubber Monkey. I mean, Rubber Monkey, if it had photo in the name, you'd feel it was centric to photos. If it was lighting in the name, you'd feel it was just a lighting. But Rubber Monkey just leaves the scope quite broad. So we often find we can sell products we never thought we'd be able to sell in our market. So there's a lot of trial and error, but we're getting really good at that stuff. A lot of the trial and errors are over, so we have really strong core lines. In Australia, it's really about getting into that huge market, getting on the ground, and as quickly as possible growing our presence and propagating that Rubber Monkey name throughout Google. For us, the success comes from how quickly we can get on that page 1 of Google results and get the name out there, get the brand on other people's websites, get them linking back to us, get manufacturers linking to us. That stuff just takes time. But in a market like Australia, where we're not starting from zero, we don't have to build a new website. We can basically just get stock in there and get cracking. We expect the trajectory to be quite high, and growth begets growth. The faster you're growing, the faster you can grow, and it keeps going and going. So I feel like these numbers are pretty conservative from my perspective, but giving it our best strategic review of where things were in Australia, given the size of the market and what I know about it. That's where these numbers come from. I'll quickly touch on, before I finish up, gross margin increasing to 30%. I mean, it's largely factored by things like, one of the things is white label brands. So we've started doing a lot of that stuff, but in the market that we're in, there's plenty of room for white label brands. So a white label brand, if you don't know, is buying from manufacturers directly, putting our own trademark name on it, buying at quantity. They're just generally talking about hundreds of pieces of gear, but the overall effect on margin is quite high because you're essentially the brand owner. Other opportunities there are just increase of scale. So the more we buy, the cheaper we can buy it. The more we freight at a time, the cheaper freight is. So we've factored all these things in here, and this is where we get these numbers from. Okay, I think it's our last slide here. But so starting at a pre-money valuation of 20 million, looking at 2.5 million, or up to 2.5, between 1.5 and 2.5 million. We've based it on the right amount of money we think to put into stock without going crazy. People have asked me about this one a lot, so I'll just touch on it briefly, where there's a number where if you go over that, you almost have too much money, and I think you start spending money on things that are less great opportunities rather than just being patient and picking only good ones. I think a lot of companies would just like to take a lot of money and just throw it at stuff, but then you have weird things happening, like money gets sort of wasted on expensive furniture, I think, or something like that. It's not what we're focused on. Is all the dollars that go into Rubber Monkey go into productive, strategic assets like stock, like something comes out of it. It's not paying off debt. It's proactive cash going into the business, and this is the focus for us. The rest sort of explains itself. Minimum investment is $500. That's a share price of $1 each. Q&A time. Over to you, David.
Great. Thanks so much, Laurie. I'm just going to move the screen slightly. Okay, excellent. So just a reminder. Oh, hang on. Am I on mute? No. Just a reminder. If you'd like to ask a question, if you could just click on that tab at the bottom, ask a question. And as I said earlier, people can vote for those. I've got some questions to start off with, so I'm going to kick off with these, but please just join in and let us know your questions. So Laurie, I think a lot of people always like to talk about the revenue forecasts, and
Yep.
Of course you're looking out to a five-year period.
Yep.
I just want to touch a little bit on what are the main drivers of that, and maybe let's look at the two different markets. You've been in New Zealand a long time now, 10 years, and you've grown that up to about 17 and a half. The forecast is sort of predicting sort of a steady 20% growth in New Zealand. So maybe let's start with New Zealand. What are the key drivers to continually achieve 20% over the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I mean, I spoke about that briefly, but basically what we've found is there's a core range of stuff that we sell, and you can get better and go deeper on those brands, and then you're adding more top quality brands to that stuff. And those things, we find to market from the day we decide to do a brand to actually selling it, although this period's gotten shorter, is sort of between 3 to 6 months. It sort of seeds itself on the web and people find it. So in a way, add more stuff, get more sales is actually true. It's not quite as simple as that, because depending on the brand, there are commitments to stocking and that sort of stuff. You can't just say, hey, we want your brand, and list everything and not necessarily stock it, because what happens sort of gets lost. And Google has an awareness of stock. It knows when you've got things in stock or out of stock, and that will help your SEO results. So we find stock is the driver for a lot of the stuff and a lot of the growth possibility for Rubber Monkey. So the more range, the more stock, that's what drives a lot of those outcomes.
Okay, that's helpful. There's a couple of questions coming, but before I go to those, because I think maybe we'll just finish off and talk a little bit about Australia as well. So, why do you think the Australian market will be as successful as New Zealand?
There's a whole bunch of factors. One is I spend a lot of time there, so I kind of understand that market, and a little bit like what spawned Rubber Monkey in the first place. I've been frequently going back over there, and I've been thinking about this for a long time. So, and I've got a lot of friends, and I was involved with a lot of businesses over there, and I kind of understand how their wheels turn. It's kind of the same thing as New Zealand, is that you've got these incumbent businesses. They've been in the market a long time as bricks and mortar. They've chucked a website on there. They're trying to manage that. They're excited about their web prospects. But they can't focus too hard on that, because then they lose their bricks and mortar focus, and you can't quite do both. You can, but it's hard. It's really hard, and only a few people have done it. Rubber Monkey is really focused on getting the web right, and Australia, because it's such a big region. If you had 10 stores in Sydney, Australia, you'd have barely scratched the surface, because it's such a huge space that you can't quite have a store where everyone needs it. I mean, you can certainly cover central Sydney, but in the outer limits, where a lot of people live, you're not there. So it's a great place for really good quality e-commerce, and people love it. Australians spend a lot more money now than they ever did, especially after COVID. So having a specialist e-commerce store over there, and knowing what we know, it's like we've got a secret weapon. Like, I sit there and go, man, if these guys knew what we knew, because I talk to them about it a lot. I mean, talk directly to businesses that we would otherwise be in competition with, and ask how they do this and ask how they do that. It's like, wow, I mean, that's old-fashioned. So I feel really good. I just feel like we've got this secret weapon, and we've spent the time to build it. And now that we've got it, it's just like, look out.
So maybe then I might turn this around a little bit and say, if the Australian, like in 10 years, you've grown, from nothing to 17.5 in New Zealand. And as you've said, the population in Australia is 5 times, but actually the average spend online and the total gross spend online is much, much higher. Some might argue, well, why are you not forecasting higher growth in Australia over the next 5 years? What do you think is going to get in the way? What's making you more conservative, I guess, on that?
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, good things take time, and the thing that takes time in any new territory is you've got to get that Rubber Monkey brand at the top of Google results, and it takes time. Like, you can't overnight have thousands of influencers just linking to your website, because they don't even know who you are. And there are what we noticed with Rubber Monkey New Zealand is that we had a well-formulated website that was SEO friendly. We had some good content, and we were kind of unique too. So some of the brands we have were exclusive, and that certainly helps you bump up the list in Google. But in Australia, that'll be slightly different, because some of those brands are already in market. So basically, over the long stretch, what we're trying to do is build brand awareness. Just get it, and that means top 5, top 10 Google SEO result. Rubber Monkey, what the hell's that? We've got to get there, and that takes time. That takes reaching out to suppliers and making sure they link to you, reaching out to customers that have successful websites and making sure they link to you, having people want to link to you. So we have to sort of get that community spirit going over there, where people go, yeah, man, Rubber Monkey, I'm going to talk about them, I'm going to link to them, buy from them. And this slowly builds our brand online in that Google search result space. And that's 90% of it. Yeah.
Okay, no, thank you. I'm going to dive to one of these questions that have come in
Cool.
I think it's a great question, and a lot of this is probably going to be about Australia because a lot of the growth forecasting is coming from that, or even a derivative of that, I guess. And this is probably where this goes to, which is, with the move into Australia, will that increase the overall buying power in Australasia and flow on to pricing decreases? This might be from a customer here, decreases in New Zealand.
Yes, depending on a bunch of factors. So I'll pick a couple of brands. So there's certain brands at the moment that we import from Australia whereby the freight cost is quite a burden. I think our pricing is okay, but to do better, we'd have to do things logistically. So Australia gives us a logistical advantage in that if we can ship a lot of goods from Australia by sea, for example, we reduce that freight factor down quite a lot. So that would be true of quite a number of brands. Because there are brands that we have that are like Rubber Monkey is the reseller distributor for the APAC region, buying more stuff. So servicing Australia and New Zealand just means we bought more stuff overall, which gives us a lot of access to better pricing. Often with these things, 50 pieces, 100 pieces of a thing, if you can only sell 30 annually in New Zealand, but the minimum to get the discount is 50, that's a problem. If it's 100, that's a problem. But if you're in a market where leveraging Australia to help get those quantities up, you can do those numbers, then of course New Zealand benefits. So that's pretty cool. I'm actually really excited about that because I really kind of want to make a difference in New Zealand, and I think we need Australia to help do that. So it's a good question, and yes, there will be times when that is not true. It kind of depends. Everything takes time. So the goal is to reduce prices for Kiwis. That's one of them, but there's lots of moving parts.
So I guess maybe just a lead on from that then, in terms of the setup in Australia, can you maybe touch on how that's going and how you're progressing with local suppliers? Because that's obviously a big factor in terms of adding those additional SKUs and getting better pricing.
Yeah, cool. So everything's good to go. We have our own warehouse. We're in a business park, so it's an downstairs warehouse, upstairs office. That is done. If we put some stock in there today, we could ship it today. But there's a couple of specifics that we need to do to control the movement of logistics in our back end, because we can't have stock shipping from New Zealand if it's embargoed to Australia and vice versa. So to manage that effectively, we need to build stuff. And we're really close on that. So it's pretty much done. It's a shame I don't actually have some pictures because she's looking good over there. But we will have that up and running, I think, by August is sort of the time frame. So stock on the ground around August, and we'll do some test shipments and we'll be underway, but it's very close.
And that doesn't involve 3PL? That's your own logistics, is it?
I need to expand on that question.
Yeah, okay.
3PL is interesting. So 3PL versus doing this stuff internally is an ongoing debate. And I feel like I'm a huge proponent of having your hands on the dials, so like if you have your own warehouse and your own people, then it's up to you to get that thing performing really well. And I believe that's a part of e-commerce and what you do. Like what you should be good at is moving the boxes and managing your stock. If you pass that off to a 3PL, you're absolutely at the mercy of how good those guys manage stock, how well they manage their company. If something goes wrong, what are you going to do? You can call them and go, hey, you stuff that up, and then put the phone down. But will anything happen? You don't really have control other than the angry phone call. You can't go in there and go, okay, guys, what happened? Okay, let's look at this and consider how we had this failure. So you're absolutely reliant on them. It's not particularly cheap. I think with us, it scales well, if you start off, you're going, oh, it would have been cheaper to 3PL than doing it ourselves. But once you've built it and you start scaling, then it's sort of about the same, but you've got this absolutely excellent efficiency and control. We noticed that with COVID because a lot of our suppliers were just like, oh, we're just hoping we can get one of the guys in the warehouse to come in. We've been calling the 3PL and it's a bit of a disaster because they, this and that and the other thing. Whereas at Rubber Monkey, it's like we'd kind of, without even realizing, we'd thought of it already. So our warehouse was really efficiently operating throughout COVID, and our systems are state of the art. Like it was built by people that really understood, and we had a lot of good consultation with people who had built awesome warehouses. I can't get into specifics about who those people are, but it's quite extraordinary how much control of the movement of freight we have, and we're always working on it. With 3PL, it's a black box. Hopefully, they don't screw you around, but they often do. And I've heard more horror stories about 3PL than I care to think about.
Okay, no, thanks, Laurie. That's excellent. I'm going to dive into another question here. I'm going to give you a chance to have a bit more of a sip of water there. A question here: what is the process to sell shares? And I'll answer that one for you. I think it's very important to understand that investing in a private company like Rubber Monkey or any really of the offers that we do, there's no liquid market, or it's not like buying shares in a listed company that you can easily sell. So you really need to make an investment where you're looking for the long-term investment, and it's really an exit in the future. If you did want to sell shares before that happens, really it's a matter of finding a buyer, and that can happen. There's nothing preventing you from doing it, but it is there's no marketplace to do it. Like you can't put it on Trade Me, for example. I think that's against their rules. So yeah, hopefully that answers that question. So I'm going to dive back into another of these questions here. What is your strategy to conquer the AV camera market in Australia that would drive our investment to grow? There are already successful AV camera retailers over there. What makes Rubber Monkey different from them?
Yeah. It's probably it's a continuation of what works in New Zealand. When you say there are successful AV camera retailers, that's an interesting summary of what Rubber Monkey is, because we get a lot of like camera stores saying you're our biggest competition, but Rubber Monkey, we don't feel like we're a camera store per se. Like, we sell cameras, but our focus is like the entire ecosystem. So if you're a dedicated photographer, you've got choice from here to Mars. So for us to come out with a focus on photography would kind of be crazy. We're always trying to be that little bit different. So an AV camera retailer to me in Australia, I can think of a few. I can think of one that's probably a standout. They don't have our technology, and our technology drives, if nothing else, outcomes, like really good outcomes for people. So some of you might have noticed that we have a really strong Google reviews, about 4.9 star reviews. I don't think there's anything close to that in Australia, and that's because it's mind-blowingly hard to do e-commerce. There's so many moving parts, and these guys that are doing this stuff, like Australia is huge. I've been over there and found guys doing very well out of their garage, selling the same stuff as everyone else, because that market's so big. So you can be somewhat successful at a lot of levels. But if you really want to go into a market and nail it, you've got to get a lot of things right. So it's not about one. It's not about we just got the cheapest, or we've got the best website, or we've got the best culture, we've got the best this. If you're incrementally better at a bunch of things, then you're gonna win, and eventually, and then the rest is just the time it takes to do that. That's what we experienced in New Zealand, because we're so conscious of the fact of if we get a bad review, for example, and someone goes, you did this and you screwed this up, we don't sit there and go, oh, Rick, whatever. We literally have a meeting and go, how did this happen? We break everything down and we look for the problem. We work out how to fix it, and we have a place to fix it. Like we have a slot there in our system to go, right. So what should have happened is this reminder should have happened then and on this day, and this will stop this. And cool, can we do that? Done. We're constantly refining that stuff. Do these guys have that? No, they don't. That's the difference. I mean, and I can't go on about it enough. Like they have systems, but they don't have systems like we have systems.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you. Maybe it would be good to touch a little bit on your product range, because you talked about, cameras then, and AV equipment, 94,000 SKUs, but obviously in the specialist areas. Do you want to just describe that, the kind of product range and groups, and can you, and who that targets? Who is that community?
Yeah. I kind of get asked this quite a bit, what are some of your top sellers? But unfortunately, whenever they ask that, I think they sort of ask, they're trying to paint a picture of Rubber Monkey. And I like to make it so it's hard to paint that picture. It's a bit more of a Jackson Pollock, It's like, the thing is, what we focus on is the ecosystem for a particular customer. So let's say you're into podcasting. So podcasting can be a phone and a lav mic, and that's it. And you start out with that. And then you might go, okay, I want a better mic because, I think podcasting is, in the last couple of years, like with COVID, we found that podcasting was this huge uptake. And then as the years go by, people get more refined in terms of what makes a good podcast. Do I need to have video? Some of these large diaphragm mics, because a podcast is often the thing that people listen to at bedtime, or is really relaxing. They want a really good sound. It's sort of, really close mic'd, because the sound of the person talking can be quite hypnotic, right? So all these mics have come out that service that sort of thing. So Rubber Monkey will immediately be on top of that sort of stuff. It'll be a priority for us to have the range of things and the bits that go with them, and provide them a little package. And it's all about podcasting and the bits that might go with it here and the bits that might go with it there. So I'd say that's one category of products that we'll do. And of course, there's a camera in the middle of all that. And that person might want to do something more sophisticated later on, and they might want to add media content there. So they might need to switch it and they have 4 cameras. So it's kind of this ecosystem that sort of works off. You sort of start here and then get this thing and then get that thing. That's kind of how we've built our brand, like what goes with the thing that goes with the other thing. And it's kind of never ending, because, in 6 months from now, a year from now, there'll be some product that none of us have even thought of. I mean, drones are a good example. I always bring up the drones, because drones, around 2010, 2011, the first camera drones were starting to come out. And now they've sort of revolutionized the way people create content. And there's more stuff, and camera stabilizers, and more stuff and more stuff. And we kind of pursue that because it fits in that ecosystem. Like, we're right there going, what's the new cool thing that'll help you make a better piece of content? That's generally what drives our stuff, instead of a very specific, like really specialized, super focused thing. It's like, we're for content creators, and it's just the podcast guys. Then you've got the guys that are shooting with drones, or guys that are shooting really specialist types of photography, like macro photography.
Yeah,
I see stuff all the time, and I'm like, whoa, like, I didn't even know that was a thing. Like, that's pretty cool. Maybe we need to build this little store in Rubber Monkey that just focuses on that type of product. Does that kind of answer that, David?
Oh, no, that's good. And I think it leads actually just to another question that someone posted. So that's really good background. And the question here was, with existing brands, which you purchase from New Zealand distributors, would you be shifting to Australian located distributors? And I think you kind of answered this, i.e. cheapest source wins, or will you retain loyalty to New Zealand distributors? That could be from a distributor here.
Yeah, mixed
Be
answer.
careful.
That's a mixed answer. So you, reading between the lines, there's a suggestion that Australian distributors might be better or cheaper. I found that not always true. Some of the distributors of products in New Zealand are pretty bloody good at what they do, like really good. And I think we've got a voice in Australia. When you deal with manufacturers, and we often meet the manufacturers of stuff, even if we're not a distributor, we'll talk to them. But having a bit of a voice in the wider APAC region, because we're just bigger, and they go, oh yeah, we've heard of Rubber Monkey, you sell a lot of stuff for us. You get to sort of make suggestions to manufacturers, and we tend to support those people who are just good at what they do. You know, if they're doing a crap job and they're letting down the team, yeah, probably not going to be too supportive. It's not really about New Zealand and Australia, but to really qualify that, you know, we've got distributors in New Zealand that are bloody salt of the earth, like really, really good at what they do. Great product knowledge. It's not just another brand. They're really focused on it. We have some that are not so good. And in Australia, it's the same over there. So I think, look, some of this is dictated to us anyway. We can't just go buy from Australia to supply New Zealand. I mean, there are literally letters that we've been handed going, the minute you do that, it's over. So we've got to be careful, because it's like that for a lot of, you know, the JB Hi-Fis and the Harvey Normans. That, you know, you've got to be conscious of the fact that they have these relationships in market that you've got to they want to protect, and you need to just stick by the rules.
Okay, thank you. Another good question here, and you know, I think just a bit of background. I mean, a lot of people will be thinking about the current economic environment.
Yeah.
You know, there is a likely consumer recession, or potential one coming down, and no one's really going to know the full impact. But certainly, inflation is biting and hurting people.
Yeah.
So the question here is, you know, how much of your revenue do you think is discretionary? And would your strategy change in a tougher environment? It's a really good question here.
I love the recession question. So I'll focus on that for a minute. So Jim, I think my feeling on so when you come into a recession, you know, there's a bunch of strategies depending on what kind of business you are. So if you are an incumbent, you've been doing the same thing for 30 years, 40 years, you've got, you know, a little bit of growth every year. When a recession comes along, you don't have, I mean, what are you going to do that you weren't doing anyway? You're kind of like, okay, we better like tighten the purse strings and be a bit careful. We might have to let Sally go and let Steve go, whatever. You've got to do that. I mean, those are the things. If it means your survival, or you just button down the hatches and try to deal. What it means for a company like Rubber Monkey, which is on a bit of a growth path and is trying to do all these things, is that now is the time to really double down on strategy, because during a recession period, and a lot of our competitors are like this, they'll have to really consider their options. They don't have a list of 5 awesome things that they're about to that Rubber Monkey, you know, they're not. Are they opening a new branch in New Zealand? No. Are they, you know, do they have these, you know, great brands that want them to sell the product in a new market? Do they have, you know, it goes on. So Rubber Monkey has all these great opportunities of things to do in this recession period, which means, you know, we're sort of, rather than just sit back and hope, you know, the wave rolls over, we're basically going to like tackle this with a view of like, let's by attrition build our customer base. It may not mean massive growth, but what it will mean is that we're able to be, if we're stronger throughout that period and we're gaining ground with new customers and building our customer base, when we come out the other side, well, you know, they're weaker and we're stronger. And this is something that we can do. It's really good timing for us to be doing this Australia launch, because it's all new money. It's all new money on the ground over there. I mean, we can pay the bills from now till eternity as it is a profitable company, but we can get in there and we can really do something, and that's pretty exciting to me. To get into this discretionary spending, well, we don't really, pretty efficient business. I mean, discretionary spending, we don't spend a huge amount on expensive stuff, and we try to be quite conservative. My manager in Sydney is currently painting a wall over there. So
sorry, Laurie, I think actually the question is about the consumer. How much of your revenue is generated from consumers with discretionary, as opposed to
Oh, I see. Our discretionary spending.
as opposed to need for the activity that they
Oh, yeah.
conduct for business purposes or something like that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
We started just after the GFC, so during that period, I think what we discovered is a lot of this, because a lot of the things that we sell, people use to make their money. They may buy less of it. I would agree. I mean, and this is only a topic I'd be an absolute expert on after the fact, but I think my expectation is we'll see, a flatter growth curve, because there will be some things like even in a market where people buy the gear they need to use to make their money. The people that work in this industry are quite passionate, so they like cool gear, they like the nice things. They might hold off buying that new thing. But what we've noticed just lately is people are still spending. There are still opportunities, and we can combat that by just having more stuff to sell people. I'd expect there to be a little bit of a downturn per customer, but not so much as it's not purely. They still need gear. They still need to buy stuff. A lot of new business, a lot of our institutional business is still ongoing, and that hasn't changed. They still have budgets that haven't changed. So, yeah, am I answering that?
Yeah, I guess it's hard for you to know exactly what is discretionary for consumers when you see your sales coming in, but
Yeah.
I guess you're selling into an activity based market rather than selling TVs online that are purely discretionary with although some might say it's a need. Maybe you could touch a little bit on you do trade sales, don't you? And I guess that's certainly more need. But how easy is it to identify the consumer between an activity that's maybe professional versus pleasure or hobby?
Pretty easy, but it's a bit of a manual process at the moment. We're finding ways of doing that algorithmically in the website, because there's a certain type of breed of product that tends to be more commercial than other products. I don't think of us really as a consumer electronics company. It's generally true to say the things we sell, people use to make money, or with a view to making money, like they might be getting into something for the first time. And so they're like setting up to do a podcast or setting up to do a thing because they hope that in a year's time it'll be able to be monetized. But and we found that a lot, certainly during COVID. The crystal ball gazing only goes so far, but like we can do a lot to adapt our offering to the market. So if it's more of this or more of that, I think when people say discretionary spending, it's like my understanding is that people tend to make themselves feel better too during a recession. So just not spending money on frivolous items is not necessarily true. So if we did sell all of that stuff, who knows? It might be less of it overall. All I know is that because we tend to sell stuff that people use to make money, I think that probably gives us a pretty strong position.
Yeah. Okay. And so in terms of, you talked, like the end part of that question was about, and I'm sort of hammering on this because I think it is a really important part of the forecast and stuff. But the end bit was, would you alter your strategy? So you've got a 5-year plan. Will there be any variation in the strategy if you see, say, over the next 6 months, a little bit of a pullback in spending, or there's there is a technical recession, or
the only thing that we'll do, but we would do this stuff anyway. Like we're constantly focusing on the trends of things that are selling. Are we doing, in this category, is it taking off? So during COVID, everyone worked from home, and half our team just started adding products that will work from home, and all of a sudden we had this huge boost in sales of work from home product. So we tend to do that anyway. We're always sort of tracking, winners. But I think nothing would. I don't expect us to pull back. It's an opportunity. Like this recession thing is like you either want to participate in it, and by that I mean, back off and be a bit pessimistic, or you go, I see opportunity. And with Rubber Monkey, we're really well poised. We're a dynamic company that we can change things quickly, which means, and by that I mean like focus on these products and not these products for a time being. I'm sure there'll be some things that we might not spend money on, but would probably double down on, more stuff. Honestly, more products, more relevant products in that climate would be the focus, and
Right.
yield a good result for us, I think.
So it could be just depending on what's selling more in a different type of environment, then you tailor towards that.
That is exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. No, okay. Hopefully that did answer that. People found that bit of the discussion helpful. Question here about what happens if you don't meet your target of 1.5 to 2.5. So I guess it's a a two-part question. There's probably a technical, what happens in terms of how the raise works through Snowball. So maybe I ask that, and then maybe the second part of that question is how might you alter your strategy with a lower amount of capital. So the first bit, technically, the minimum is 1.5. If you go through the investment process, if the minimum is not hit, then none of that investment is put through, and the any money that's been paid across is then refunded to the investor. So technically, the raise must get to the minimum of 1.5, although we're confident it will. Maybe the second half, I'll pass over to you, Laurie. There is just the range of 1.5 to 2.5.
Yeah.
If you're at the lower end, how might you alter your strategy?
The strategy doesn't really change. I mean, it's basically is your foot half on the gas or all the way on the gas. I keep using these metaphors, but it's probably for me, it's the best way to explain that. More stuff to sell means more sales. Essentially, once the engine is working, the Rubber Monkey platform, like we're really good at getting boxes and selling them. We've got to pick the right boxes, and we market them and we do our thing. The more of those boxes we've got to sell, the more opportunity. So all that happens between 1.5 and 2.5 is more opportunity. So if I'm to give some perspective, if I'm a shareholder, I want to convince other people to invest too, because it's an outcome for the company, but it's an outcome for all shareholders. So if we were cheating around 1.5, like, I don't know, elbow your bloody friend, like the more money that comes in, the faster we'll all grow together, because we're all in this business together. And there's a lot more opportunity with that extra 1 million to do a lot of stuff. We get bombarded with opportunity every day. Like, it's pretty amazing. We got to this point where Rubber Monkey is on, I think we're on a targeted list. And I don't just mean like really good, high quality brands come to Rubber Monkey and go, do you want to sell our product? And we're like, not just yet, because you're 5 on a list and they can't do everything. So imagine I could do everything on the list. And I'm talking, like, I can't be specific, but some pretty awesome brands come to us.
Excellent. Okay. Conscious of time, so a couple of questions here. Why call for investment from the public?
Yep.
You talked a bit about that, but I think dive into this would be good. When your current business looks profitable to carry the amount needed in the offering. So I think suggesting there that couldn't you just keep growing with the profit you've got, and also why not invest yourself? So that all of those, if you can quickly get into those, just conscious of time.
Okay. Okay. So we'll call for investment from the public. I mean, largely this came about. So it's not a case of not having other options. I mean, the pedigree of obviously people involved in this business, there's certainly money available. It actually stems a lot from me. Like, I felt that being equal partner with Nigel was a good thing, and he agreed. And so if for example, if he was to put the money in, that pivots things a little bit. and for me, I wasn't even looking at crowdfunding until I looked into a few outcomes for some other companies that went through crowdfunding. And I said, that sounds awesome. That's 100% perfect alignment with Rubber Monkey and what we do, because we're all about community and we love some customers to jump on board and be a part of the company and kind of own shares in the company they buy from and become ambassadors. And it's like, I don't know if I know what the downside is. I think that's really exciting. And it sort of went from there. And until it sort of like something like crowdfund was a bit of a no-brainer. I think if someone's asking me what will we do if we don't get the money at all, I mean, of course, we've got other options. So it'll happen anyway. But I guess it'll just be a shame for me because I find it important for me personally that community is a huge part of our company, and our customers sort of feel that way. So this is the opportunity that we give them to be involved right now.
Cool, thank you. Couple other questions. When will dividends on investments start? So this is covered a bit in the IM. Maybe if I quickly answer this, and then you could correct me on it. But I think the IM it sort of states there's no current intention to pay out dividends in the short term, mainly because the idea is to reinvest that additional profits into growing the business, because there's an opportunity that you see in the business in the short term. But there is certainly you'd look at paying dividends in the future when there wasn't a great significant upside in reinvesting it. Is that a fair summary?
That's right. I mean, if it comes to a point where we've got a bank load of money and we're not really sure that we can effectively reinvest it in the business, then it makes absolute sense to provide dividends. Although like there's Rubber Monkey as in what it is today, we've built a platform. There are bigger opportunities. There are opportunities out there that we're not really going to get into in this capital raise, but to diversify what this company does, there will be other opportunities. That means it's kind of a decision for all stakeholders. Do we just want to sort of take some money now and keep this particular pace, or do we want to just go for the long haul, build a really high value company, and then create a great outcome at the end? And then by the end, I mean when a liquidity event happens, like an IPO or a takeover or something like that, someone just buy us out. But I will look at all opportunities. Definitely not against the idea of dividends. It's just a strategic thing, really, making sure it's the right thing for the business.
I guess the key point there again in terms of disclosure for people looking to invest in this is just there's no guarantee in terms of short-term dividends, and I think that's probably the takeaway there is this is a growth investment. The idea is that the company would continue to grow the business to increase its value, and that's the key point. There's another question here. How has stock delays or no stock and shortages going to affect going forward? I guess it comes down to like just we read about it all the time, isn't it? The difficulty of getting stock and moving stock around the world. Do you have stock delays or outages that? How do you manage that? That might be a good way to answer this question. Is how do you manage this stock shortages?
So I think an important thing is to differentiate what Rubber Monkey, how it will affect Rubber Monkey versus, because stock delays or no stock, well, everyone's in that boat. We're all in that boat. Doesn't matter who you are. I mean, you're in that boat. So what can Rubber Monkey do that's sort of different and is advantageous is that we have the ability to hold more stock, I think, than a lot of other. I mean, we have our own warehouses. We're getting better just in timing stock. Like we can consolidate things out of the US and out of China that some of our competitors may not be able to do. There's little things that we can do. Getting absolutely no stock, but everyone's in that boat. It's something that we're constantly working on because because we can look at it and go, okay, so could we source stuff from here, or could we source alternatives from there? How do we compensate for that? Lately, I've found that there was this big window of delays. So now what's happened is we sort of have to forecast much further. I know that some of the suppliers that we have talked to me about, we got to put in a forward order like 3 months in advance or 6 months. So we've kind of conformed to that a bit more. So stock does come through, but you've just got to get in much earlier now. Get the stuff paid for, which takes a bit of money, and then be patient. So it's taking longer to get the stock. So the sooner you get in and get it done. But when you've got it, it's gold. If people don't have it, they don't get the business. So what's key for us is making sure we stay on top of that stuff and have the stock.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I might, draw it to a conclusion now. So thanks so much, Laurie, for answering those questions.
No problem.
Just going to, thank everyone again for joining us. We will be circulating a recording, so you can listen to it again. And when you do, you'll find that there are some easy ways of clicking through to particular questions and going straight to that element in the video, which is hopefully helpful. Just a reminder that the offer is live now, so accepting investment. So you can go through that investment process. It's very simple. It's all online. You just click through it, and it's all pretty self-explanatory. But if you have any questions on that, you're very, very welcome just to approach any of us at Snowball Effect. You would have received a lot of emails from my colleague Paul Beale, and either Paul or myself, David, can help with that. The offer is scheduled to close on the 5th of August. Unless it's fully subscribed earlier. So please feel free to submit any additional questions online. You can do that on the platform, and or just send emails to us and we can get those answered. So again, thank you very, very much. I'll just hand over to Laurie just to say his goodbyes and we'll call that to a conclusion.
Thanks, David. Yeah, huge thanks to you guys for coming along today. And really excited. Like I'm looking forward to running into some of you guys who become investors and talking about stuff. I really enjoy having a team of enthusiastic people as part of the company. It's not just a investment in something black box. You kind of know what it is. I'm really excited to show you potential investors what we can do for you as a company. So it's a really exciting journey, and just cool to have you guys on board.
Cool. Thank you.